All right, still in section 4.3, we're going to look at example 2, which should be easier than the last couple examples that we did. It's still factoring, but this time we're doing special patterns. Now they do have have formulas you could memorize, but to me it's just easier to just work it out. So the first one we're going to do is this one here, x squared minus 49. Now you did do this in Algebra 1. Notice that the difference between this one and the last ones we did, where this one only has 2 terms, and the ones that we did in example 1 had 3 terms. So really what you're thinking about, and you don't have to do this every time, but really what you have is this. Now you do not need to write this down for every question. I'm just showing you this for this first one. So essentially what we have is this 0x term that's missing. And just like we did in the previous problems, you're listing out your factors of negative 49, which are 1 and 49, and then 7 and 7. And to get one of them to be, in order to get a negative 49, one of them has to be negative, and the other one has to be positive. Now, the set that gets you 0 when you add them together are negative 7 and 7. So that is your factored form. And that's not really a hard way to think about it, but it's a little bit more steps than what you would actually need to do. So that is the factored form. 7 times negative 7 gets you negative 49. 7 plus negative 7 cancels out to get you the 0x term. Now the way that I would do it if it were me just working this problem out, for instance, if I had x squared minus 16. 2 terms, it has to be a minus sign. Has to be. Okay, if it's not a minus sign, this question won't work. And the way I look at it is, if you can take the square root of this number and it gets you a perfect square, then you can factor this. And all you're going to do is split up your x's. It will always, always, always be plus and minus. The square root of 16 is 4. But essentially what you're doing is you're finding the factors of negative 16 that add out the fact that it's going to get you that 0x middle term that's missing. But you don't have to go through the process of showing this step up here. Okay? Let's do another one. X squared minus 25. Same thing. Factor this one. It's got 2 terms. This is a perfect square. It is a minus sign, so we can factor this. Put x plus, x minus, and then the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, and the reason why this works, remember, if you FOIL, which I know you did in Algebra 1, we haven't got to yet, when you multiply your first, you get x squared. You multiply your outside, you get negative 5x. Inside is positive 5x. Those 2 terms cancel, and then 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. You don't have to show that process, but you can check your work that way. Okay. Now let's look at a couple of examples that don't work. Let's say, for instance, I had x squared plus 25. Because of this plus sign, it is not factorable. And the reason why is, if you look at your factors of 25, sorry, I got interrupted there. For this one, what I was saying was, if you look at the factors of 25, the only factors are 1 and 25 and 5 and 5. And since you're trying to get a positive 25, both of these have to be positive or they both have to be negative. Well, if that's the case, none of those cancel out to the 0x that you actually have there. That's why this one is not factorable. So if it's a plus sign separating the 2 terms, it makes a big difference whether instead of it being a minus sign. Another thing that could happen is this. X squared minus 18. It does have a minus sign, but 18 is not a perfect square. If you try to type in the square root of 18, you're going to get a decimal. So this one is also not factorable. So these are really the only 2 cases where things are not factorable. If you have a plus sign separating the 2, and or if one of them is not a perfect square. Okay. Another thing that could happen, this is the last type, is if you have something maybe in front of the first term, which I really didn't want to do in this section, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. Actually, no, we'll save that for later. Okay, so that's it for this section.